I welcome you all to the module 10 of this course. Module 10 is about personality development and change. So, this is the first lecture of this module and it is overall lecture number 21. So, today's lecture will be based on the concept of stability and change of personality. So, before we talk about today's lecture, let me give you a brief recap of the last lecture, which was part of module 9. In the last lecture, we talked about the impact of culture on personality. So, we talked about how culture can influence personality and so on. We studied the diverse aspects around how culture can be connected to personality in terms of shaping personality and so on. We discussed various approaches to study personality and cultures. We kind of discussed various anthropological, psychological approaches that looked into how culture can shape personality and so on. We also discussed what is the importance of cross cultural differences, why it is important to study these differences. So, those factors we have discussed. We also discussed approaches in certain understanding of relationship between culture and personality, and at the end we discussed cultural differences in the self construal as a construct, how we define ourselves in relationship to others, how that concept of self construal is different in different cultures. So, these are some of the things that we discussed in the last lecture. So, let us start today's lecture. So, the today's lecture will be based on the idea of the concept of stability and change in personality. To what extent the personalities are stable and to what extent there can be changes within the personality. So, we will be discussing the concept of stability of personality, causes of personality stability, then we will be talking about personality change and what are the causes of personality changes. We will also look at some of the historical perspective in terms of how personalities are changing with the passage of time. We will be also looking at some self initiated personality change, and at the end we will be talking about obstacles in changing personality. So, the concept of stability of personality, when we talk about personality, by definition personality is relatively permanent aspects of behavior. So, these are when we talk about certain traits, certain personality traits, we are talking about that these are those traits which are relatively permanent, they do not change overnight or on a few days, these are like relatively stable characteristics, patterns of behavior of human beings. So, the stability is included in the definition of personality itself. So, people generally, and it has been found even in longer periods also, personality can be quite stable. So, people show a strong tendency to maintain these distinctive patterns of behavior throughout life. So, generally people have a tendency to maintain once this personality gets set up, it kind of maintains people, there is an inherent tendency to maintain that or maintain the personality for a long time. For example, a child who exhibits more extroversion compared to peers is likely to remain more extroverted than most of others in adolescence. So, some research shows that even child who during the childhood, the child who is extroverted in terms of behavior, there is an extroversion characteristics, is more likely to remain extroverted even during adolescence or adulthood later in the life, and even in old age. So, there is a quite long term stability of personality traits. Similarly, a child who displays varying levels of neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness or openness compared to their peers is likely to maintain this distinction over time. This is known as rank order consistency. So, which basically means people maintain their rank or position of personality traits. If somebody is higher than other person, that the difference seems to maintained even in the long term in terms of passage of time. So, that is called as a rank order consistency. So, there is a rank order consistency has been established in the personality traits. So, if somebody is higher on a trait as compared to their peers, they are likely to maintain that difference. The difference is maintained, that relative position is maintained even in later stages of life. So, that is called rank order consistency, and it has been established in personality in the context of personality traits. So, this rank order consistency basically refers to individuals' relative placement within a population. So, what is the relative position in terms of other people around you or your peer group, if you whether you are higher in a particular trait or lower in a particular trait as compared to other people. So, people tend to maintain that difference. So, that is called rank order consistency. However, it does not mean that people do not change over the years. Now, when this rank order consistency automatically does not mean that people do not change. It only says that rank or relative position is maintained. There can be absolute changes in terms of mean value changes in terms of traits, but that relative position is position people generally maintain. So, it just means they tend to maintain the ways in which they are different from other people of the same age. So, that relative position is maintained, that does not mean people do not change at all. So, there can be in terms of absolute values of the trait it can change, but relative position or rank order consistency seems to remain same. Now, what is the evidence of this stability? So, let us look at some of the evidences. The evidence for the stability of the traits over time is extensive and compelling. Lot of evidences are there. For instance, one study found that personality trait score measured 10 years apart shows correlation ranging from 0.60 to 0.9, indicating high stability. So, some studies shows even after 10 years people tend to maintain their personality traits in terms of correlation remains quite high, 0.60 to 0.90 in some instance, which is very high. So, that means they tend to remain same in terms of personality traits even after 10 years. Another study observed that elementary school children described as adaptable by their teachers continued to display cheerful and intellectually curious behavior in the middle age. So, even during elementary school, whatever characteristics described by the teacher for a particular children, they seems to remain same or maintain the same behavior even in the middle age. Conversely, children who are rated as impulsive were found to talk more and in a louder voice as adults also. So, some of the traits which were there during the childhood, they seems to maintain even during adulthood. Additionally, individuals who experience natural disaster such as earthquake often maintain their core personality trait despite the trauma, demonstrating significant resilience. So, even after very traumatic incidences which can shatter one's life, people seems to maintain their personality even in the context of those traumatic events also. That shows personality is quite stable, it is not so easily changed. Research also indicates that personality rating in childhood can predict adult life outcomes. So, even whatever the personality people have during childhood, lot of these characteristics can even predict adult life outcomes. For instance, children aged 4 to 6 rated as more inhibited were slower to find stable romantic partner and first job in 19 years later compared to their less inhibited peers. So, this is one of the findings. So, inhibited basically means children with behavioral inhibition are often quite shy and avoid new people and situation. So, this is the characteristics of inhibited children. So, they are basically very shy and avoid meeting new people and situations, they are mostly quiet and so on. So, children with these characteristics were basically they found even were slower to find stable romantic partner and first job even at the age of 19 years later as compared to the children who are less inhibited peers. So, that means their characteristics seems to remain even much later in their life. So, these are some of the evidences which shows the personality traits could be quite stable. So, generally children with extreme trait ratings or those described as difficult tend to encounter problems as adults. So, children who during childhood they shows certain extreme kind of behavior which are difficult behavior in terms of management, they tend to encounter a lot of problems even during adulthood also. So, that means that trait seems to be maintained even in adulthood also. On a more positive note, children rated high in traits like mastery, motivation, agreeableness at ages 8 to 12 were found to have greater academic and work achievement, less antisocial behavior and better relationship 20 years later. So, this shows even some of the positive traits related to motivation, agreeableness, they also seems to impact positively the later achievements of life and so on. So, that means those traits seems to be maintained even later, even 20 years later also. So, these are some of lot of evidences which shows that personality trait could be quite stable. Now, what is the causes of this stability of personality? Why the personality is so stable? So, let us see some of the causes behind such stability. So, one cause is the concept of temperament. So, temperament we have already discussed while we were talking about the biological aspects to personality, which basically means during the childhood or during from the birth, when a child takes birth. So, certain temperamental characteristics are determined by the genetic predisposition. That children are different even after birth, also certain their temperament in terms of emotional reactivity they differ. Some children are more active, some are less, and so on. So, these are like partially, mostly, to a large extent determined by our genetic setup. So, that is what temperament is all about. It is more of a biological aspects to personality. So, the many aspects of individual that affect personality remains constant over the years, including physical attributes and DNA. So, the initial personality or temperament in the childhood, which is mostly partially determined by inherited genes. So, a lot of temperament or emotional reactivity is determined by the genes in a childhood. So, that temperament is one of the reasons that also influences one's personality. So, this fundamental behavior and emotional tendencies rooted in early life can persist throughout life, although their manifestation change with age. So, this tendency or this temperamental characteristics can persist even in from childhood to the later part of the life. So, that can influence, but obviously, the manifestation of this temperament could change from childhood to adulthood, but the impact remains. For example, a shy child might hide behind parent at school gathering, while a shy adult might avoid conversing with strangers. So, it is the same trait, but the behavior or manifestation may change depending on the age in which the person is. Similarly, an aggressive child might kick a playmate, whereas an aggressive adult might engage in verbal arguments and so on. So, the manifestation may differ, but the underlying trait remains the same. So, a lot of the stability of personality could be attributed to the initial temperamental characteristics of the child, which is to a large extent determined by the genetic setup, which is not easy to change. So, that influence remains. So, that is why a lot of personality characteristics are quite stable. A recent analysis identifies three basic aspects of childhood temperament. So, childhood temperament has three major aspects. Some research indicates that to what extent the child has positive emotions, to what extent they are more like cheerful and display positive emotions, which could be part of temperament. Negative emotions. So, the emotional expression is mostly related to temperament. So, some childs display a lot of positive emotions, some child may display a lot of negative emotion, they all the time cry and so on. And temperament has another important aspect called effortful control, to what extent they are able to control their behavior and so on. Now, these are kind of important aspects of temperament which can impact personality later. So, this positive emotionality in the childhood may evolve into adult traits of extroversion. So, the child who has lot of these positive emotions or display positive emotion during the childhood, which it may get translated into adult trait of extroversion. So, they may become much more extrovert, where they could express a lot of these positive emotions. This negative emotionality can turn into neuroticism traits in the adulthood. So, the neurotic emotional instability and those aspects could manifest from the negative emotionality, and effortful control into conscientiousness and agreeableness. And to the child who has more effortful controlling ability, they are more likely to show trait of conscientiousness and agreeableness in the adulthood and so on. So, this emotional or temperamental characteristics of child could manifest into different traits in the adulthood. So, basically the emotional tone remains same. So, that is one of the reason why it is quite stable. The second important reason why personality traits show stability is because of the physical and environmental factors. So, beyond genes and internal biology, physical and environmental factors significantly influence personality. So, we have already discussed personality is determined by both biological aspect as well as environmental aspects. So, biological aspect we have already discussed in the context of temperament. Now, lot of environmental factors can also influence personality and cause this stability. So, the visible attributes such as gender, height, adherence to cultural standards of attractiveness impact the experience of individuals and thus shape their personality. Some of the aspect of physical environment or the physical aspects of one's persons like gender, height, to what extent somebody adheres to the cultural norms and standards can impact their experience as well as then impact their personality traits. These attributes are largely generally unchangeable and persist throughout life. So, this could be one of the aspect of physical environment which could make personality impact the personality and maintain its stability. Additionally, consistent influences come from one's social environment. So, many aspects of the social environment can also influence personality and influence the stability also, such as socio-economic status. What is your socio-economic status, whether you come from upper class, middle class, lower class, whatever it is, urban area, rural area, what is your family size, all this can influence the personality also. These are all aspects of social environment. Now, these factors often beyond an individual's control continuously affect thoughts, feelings and behaviors and impact the personality. So, your socio-economic environment where you are born and brought up, whether you are living in urban setup or rural setup, it will influence your thought processes, it will influence your personality. People may be differ in terms of people who are staying in the urban area and the rural areas because of the difference in the environment. What kind of family size, it is a small size, larger size, all this can influence and impact one's thought processes, behaviors and their feelings, which ultimately can influence their personality. Since these things generally remain same most of the life, it can change obviously, but so their impact on the personality remains quite stable. So, that is why personality also remains stable because of their constant impact from these environmental factors. Third important reasons or causes behind personality stability is childhood experiences or early experiences. Early experiences can have long lasting consequences on personality and well-being. This is what a lot of theories actually says, that childhood experiences are very important in terms of what kind of person you become as in the adults. Especially if you look at psychoanalysis or Freud's theory, he emphasized very strongly on the childhood experiences. According to him, this childhood experiences shapes your personality and it becomes kind of fixed after a certain age, and then it kind of almost remains stagnant. So, childhood experiences plays very important role in terms of defining your personality characteristics. Adults who recall being rejected by parent often struggle to form relationship throughout their lives. For example, what is one's experience during the childhood, like what kind of parenting they got, what kind of relationship they had with the parents during the childhood can impact their mindset and thought processes, which can remain or linger even in their adulthood also. For example, if somebody has a very rejecting parents, not a very cordial relationship, this could manifest even in adult life in terms of they will not be able to form healthy relationships with other people. Childhood stress such as growing up in poverty or experiencing maltreatment can lead to lifelong patterns of chronic biological inflammation, resulting in frailty, fatigue and poor health. These chronic inflammations can also cause strong emotional reaction to everyday stress. So, what kind of childhood experiences in terms of stressful environment like poverty, experiencing maltreatment from other people, becoming victim during childhood of traumatic experiences and so on, all this can impact the child's whole personality in a certain direction, and that can remain during the adulthood also. So, all these experiences plays very important role what kind of person a child becomes later. Interestingly, too little stress in early life can leave individual unprepared for future challenges. So, sometimes some level of facing of challenges during childhood, means during the early life, can also have a positive impact in terms of preparing the child, in terms of making them more stronger in terms of future challenges. So, a moderate degree of early adversity can provide the best buffer against adult challenges. So, all kinds of experiences, what kind of experiences? Negative experiences, positive experiences, the intensity of the experiences, particularly the traumatic events, all this can impact the child, and particularly in terms of shaping the personality which can remain even in adulthood. The next factor which is which could explain this stability of personality is person environment transaction. So, we discussed that biological factor within the person can determine the personality. We also discussed the environmental factor can determine personality. Now, we will be talking about how this interaction between the person and environment, what kind of transaction one does, what kind of response and reaction one does in terms of environmental factors, that can also influence one's personality and can explain stability of personality. So, another cause of stability in personality is the tendency of people to respond to, seek out and create environments compatible with the traits. People generally tend to seek out environment which is compatible to their trait. So, they will more likely to go in environments which is suitable for their traits, whatever the characteristics they have. So, that is how the transaction happens with the environment. People prefer to go in certain kind of places, certain kind of situations, because it is comfortable for their traits, and they will avoid other kind of situation because it is uncomfortable for their traits in terms of expression of traits. So, this person environment transaction determines people will what kind of places they will choose, what kind of situation they will choose to go and approach. So, there are several types of this transaction can happen. In an active person environment transaction, an aggressive person might be attracted to similar aggressive friends, leading to environments where conflicts and delinquency are common. For example, if somebody has a aggressive kind of trait, a trait with a lot of aggression, naturally this person will seek out other people or peer group who is similar in terms of aggression, because they will feel comfortable because that other person is also similar to them, or other aggressive friends they will seek out and make friends with them, and then collectively they will seek out environment where they can express their aggression, like they will go to places where there will be a lot of conflicts and fights and a lot of delinquency behavior, criminal behavior, and those kind of thing. Probably they will seek out and go in those kind of situations, because they find their trait is getting more naturally expressed in those environment. So, this is an example how a person environment transaction happens. Conversely, let us say a scholarly person may prefer the library, fostering academic success. Somebody who is more oriented towards, let us say, scholarly pursuit, such person will prefer places like going to library or going to bookshops and so on, which can help them to succeed in terms of academics and so on. So, what kind of person you are, you will seek that kind of environment. So, that is how person environment transaction happens. So, these environments are not always chosen freely. Many times people are not completely free to choose those environments. Sometimes they just find themselves in certain situation. So, those uncontrollable factors can also play a role. For instance, being arrested and sent to jail can significantly impact personality, as can failing to gain admission to a desired college. So, sometimes you want to get admission in certain colleges, but everything is not in one's control. You cannot just decide and you will get admission, because a lot of other factors can play into it. Maybe you want to appear for an entrance test where you fail and so on, because many other students are there. So, many times we may prefer certain environment, but we may not get or or interact or go into those kind of environment simply because of other uncontrollable factors. So, environments are not always freely chosen. Many situations we choose and many situations we are not able to choose, and many other factors can play a role there. So, generally people seek environment compatible with their traits. Generally people prefer to go or into places and situations which are in congruence with their traits, and they avoid situations which are incongruent with their traits, so that they can avoid discomfort and so on. For example, an extrovert is unhappy sitting quietly. So, one person who is very extrovert will seek those kind of situations where he can talk more, who can socialize with people. He will feel uncomfortable in a situation where he or she has to be quiet and so on. While an introvert will struggle in a noisy parties and so on. So, such person will avoid those kind of situations, let us say party which is very loud and noisy, because it is against the characteristics of that or traits of that person, he does not feel comfortable in those situations. So, this is called a reactive person environment transaction. So, depending certain situation will come and you will react to those situation. If it is in alignment with your trait, you will feel happy. If it is not in alignment with one's trait, you will feel unhappy and so on. So, that is called, you just react to situation that sometimes comes to your life. So, that is called reactive person environment transaction. However, sometimes people change the environment as per their wish. So, they do not just react, they change the environment. So, this is called as a evocative person environment transaction, or one can say even proactive. For example, emotionally positive and uninhibited parents are more responsive to their children, while emotionally positive and self controlled children evoke better responses from their parents. So, this is a kind of two-way transaction. So, sometimes the people who are emotionally, let us say emotionally positive and uninhibited parents, they will respond differently to the according to the nature of the other child. So, if a child is also emotionally positive and more of a self controlled nature, then generally the much better compatibility will happen and more responses will happen. So, this two-way interaction between parent and child magnifies the effect of child development over time. So, the environment, one will change the other behavior, the other will change the other's behavior. So, it will kind of magnify and go into positive loop and so on. So, that will also accelerate the development of child over time. So, similar person environment transactions occur at every stage, affecting both individuals and the surrounding. So, what kind of transaction happens? Sometimes the environment changes us, sometimes we change the environment and so on. So, sometimes it is a very much more active transaction, sometimes it is reactive, you just passively encounter certain situation and react accordingly. So, that is kind of reactive. More active and proactive kind of transaction is where you actively impact the environment, or environment kind of also impacts you. So, more active involvement is there, then it will become more evocative or proactive kind of transaction. So, the fifth reason for stability of personality is cumulative continuity and maturity. So, that is something also very important. So, a major summary of this literature dictates that correlation coefficient for personality consistency is 0.31 in children, 0.54 in college years and 0.74 between 50 and 60 ages. So, that means, if you look at this correlation coefficient with the progress of age, the personality is much more stable in the later stages of life. It is still much more malleable in the early childhood, one can change and shift, but as we progress in the age, our personality becomes much more stable and fixed. So, the correlation coefficient is increasing with the progress of age. While all these figures demonstrate impressive stability, they also show that individual differences in personality become more consistent with age, a concept known as cumulative continuity principle. So, as we age more, our stability of personality becomes much more stable or much more consistent. This principle posits that not only are personality traits relatively stable across the lifespan, but their consistency increases over time or over age. So, that is also another phenomena, consistency and stability increases with the progress of age. When one trait changes, other trait also changes in tandem, and when one trait remains stable, other, particularly the older adults, other traits also changes. So, the increasing stability of personality with age is largely attributed to stabilization of one's environment. So, as people age, they are more likely to have settled down in terms of where they live, their living arrangement and their careers and so on. So, environment becomes much more stable. So, the impact of environment is also very consistent and their personality also remains stable, because in the later part of life everything the life becomes much more stable and changes are very less. During the early childhood things changes and one has to do a lot of things, schools, environment, so many things, so many impact of environment keeps changing very rapidly. So, the possibility of changes also happens more. So, the stability is also linked to psychological maturity. With the progression of age, people become much more psychologically mature, which refers to traits that help fulfill adults' roles such as being spouse, parents, worker. All these roles we understand and we become much more mature and settle down. These traits include the traits of self control, interpersonal sensitivity, emotional stability. All this becomes kind of settled down and becomes much more stable. So, adolescents with more mature personality in these respects tend to change less over the subsequent year. So, this more mature personality, people do not change those personality, because these are helpful in settle down in the life and they have positive outcomes. For example, your ability of self control, interpersonal sensitivity, emotional stability. So, the more we become mature psychologically, then there is not much needed for change, because these mature characteristics help you to adapt in life, and so they become they are much more resistant to change. There is no need for change because they are helpful. So, with the progress of age, we become much more mature, and this maturity also increases the stability. Now, let us come to the concept of personality change. Now, we have seen lot of evidences related to personality stability. So, the personality remains stable, but can personality also change? What are the possibilities and what are the research findings? Let us see. So, research reviewed so far, whatever we have discussed, shows significant continuity in personality, especially in the middle and later adulthood, and provides multiple explanation for this stability. So, we have seen particularly the personality become much more stable in the later part of life, particularly from the adulthood to the old age. It becomes much more stable, and we try to see the various reasons for this stability. However, this concept of stability is much more nuanced than initially appears and exists in the different forms. So, when we talk about this stability, there are certain nuances in it also. So, since the retest correlation reflect rank order stability. So, one thing is very clear, this rank order there is a stability, no doubt about it, in terms of relative position. If somebody is more extroverted than the peer group, so that more or less characteristic, the relative position remains stable. So, that is what called rank order stability that we discussed, which measures the extent to which individuals maintain this rank order relative to others remain over time. This high rank order stability means that individuals who rank high in the start of a study continue to rank high at the end also. So, that is something is kind of very important. So, that rank order consistency is maintained. This is what we have seen the evidences for it. However, this rank order stability involves only relative positioning. So, relative positioning is maintained, indicate how individuals compare to others only. So, it is possible for individual ranks on a personality trait to remain stable, while the group's overall level on that trait changes. Now, research shows that even though this relative position is maintained, that there is a stability, but overall actual trait characteristics or the scores of those characteristics could change in absolute terms. So, relative terms it remains stable, but actual characteristics or the the intensity or the score of these traits can change. So, there is a kind of scope for that. So, thus while some same individual might rank high or low relative to their peers consistently, the absolute level of the trait within the group can shift over time. This absolute level or the score of the trait, what is the score of extroversion, let us say, or neuroticism, that can change in terms of scoring with the passage of time, but relative position may remain same. So, that shows there is a possibility of some changes. So, we are trying to see the evidences of what is the possibility of changes of personality. Personalities are very stable, we have seen all the evidences. Now, let us see what are the scopes of changes of personality, where it is possible. So, this research on adult personality reveal not only significant rank order stability, but also notable changes in the average level of personality traits over time. So, there is also possibility of changes in the average levels of personality traits over time. So, actual level of change personality from childhood to adolescence to adulthood and old age, that scores and the level of certain trait could change, even though the rank order may be maintained. So, the studies such as by Srivastava and colleague have shown that while there is a stability in how individuals rank relative to their peers, there is a also systematic changes in the average level of personality across adulthood. For instance, some of the evidences are like this: trait of conscientiousness tend to increase from age 21 to 30 and continues to rise, albeit at a slower pace thereafter. So, traits like conscientiousness, the research shows it tend to increase from age 21 to 30. So, as the age progresses after the young adulthood phase 21, then it goes to 30. These scores tend to change for individuals. This is what research shows. So, that means it is not fixed, it can change, although this increase may become much slower with the passage of time. Another trait of agreeableness shows a faster increase after age 30 compared to earlier years. So, after age of 30, trait like agreeableness changes very fast, or kind of shows a faster increase. So, this agreeableness increases among people after the age 30, before that it does not change that fast. Trait like neuroticism generally declines steadily over adulthood, particularly among women, while openness declines much more sharply after age 30. So, trait like neuroticism decreases generally during adulthood, particularly among women it decreases much sharply, while openness, the trait of openness decreases sharply after age 30. People become less open. So, openness kind of decreases after age 30. So, this is a kind of general finding from different populations. So, it shows that there is a possibility of change of personality trait. It is not that completely fixed. So, there is nothing like complete fixed trait, but although the relative positioning. So, somebody who is high on a trait will maintain that high trait as compared to another person, because if there is a changes is happening for both. So, the relative position remains same, but absolute values can change. So, this developmental trajectory suggests that with increased age, individuals tend to become more self-controlled, prudent and socially warm, while also becoming less emotionally volatile and less open to new experiences and ideas. So, these are some of the possible changes. What research shows that with the increase of age, people become much more self-controlled, they become much more prudent and socially warm. They also become less emotionally volatile, means their emotional stability increases and their openness to experiences and ideas decreases, because their worldviews become much more fixed and rigid. In similar terms, there is a tendency for adult development, a narrow emotional range becoming more socialized over time. So, there is a tendency for adults to develop a narrower emotional range. So, emotional range becomes low during from childhood, adolescence, the lot of emotions, the range of emotions people experience is much higher. When they become adult, the range decreases. So, less varieties of emotion we experience. However, we also become more socialized over time and so on. So, this shows certain changes are possible and certain changes happens in among people. While one might describe these changes as making people duller, it underscores the normalcy of gradual personality change throughout adulthood, challenge the view that personality is completely fixed or only changes significantly in width. So, this whole idea of complete fixed personality is not, this is not what is the evidence shows, it is not so, because there are certain lot of traits actually changes with the passage of time and ages. So, research on rank order stability of personality trait across the life scores not only highlights the normal gradual changes in average levels of traits, but also reveals evidence of individual changes in personality over time. So, this is what we have already discussed. So, despite this general stability of broad personality traits in adulthood, retest correlation do not reach perfection, because if you see the correlations across different time period is quite high for a lot of personality traits, but it is not perfect. So, that means there is a changes certain minor changes or small changes happens in the traits. So, this means that some individuals experience significant shift in their personality traits over the years. Even in late adulthood, small but notable fraction of people undergo some degree of personality change. So, personality change can happen and lot of people actually experiences some significant personality changes. This finding challenges the notion that personality becomes completely fixed. So, that is not what is shown here. So, the personality change in adulthood is recognized as a phenomenon that while not common to a large scale for everyone, but it is entirely feasible. So, at least evidence shows personality change can happen in many dimensions, although it may not be very common or may not be very sharp kind of changes, but it is entirely possible. So, the stability of personality traits varies significantly across different stages of life. Lot of longitudinal studies shows some of this thing is shown here. For example, Roberts and colleagues in 2000 reviewed 152 such studies, and they found for adults aged 30 to 73 retest correlation range about 0.67 over a span of approximately 7 years. Young adults from 18 to 21 showed an average retest correlation of 0.57. Children and adolescents had lower average retest correlation of 0.5. So, that means again this is what we have already discussed, that with higher ages the stability of personality is much stronger. So, in the higher age group, if you see the correlation is very high. So, that means the personality stability is much higher, but lower ages the correlation is less, means the more possibility of changes. In infant and toddler the correlation is only 0.3, that means much more changes are possible in the lower ages. So, in the childhood or even in early adolescence, so this gives much more scope in terms of changing of personality. Changing becomes less possible with the let us say late adulthood or old age and so on, because in those stages generally research shows personality change generally happens very less. It can happen, but the correlation shows people generally change less in those age groups. So, this correlation indicates that personality stability decreases as we move closer to early childhood. So, the more early in our age group, the more chances of possibility of changes. Trait assessed in early childhood generally do not provide strong indications of personality in middle childhood, let alone adulthood. So, childhood obviously there can be impact of childhood experiences, but there is also possibility of more malleability in childhood. So, you can shape yourself in certain ways, and obviously with the passage of time that changing possibility of changing and shaping oneself it becomes much more difficult. This finding challenges the proverb that child is the father of man, suggesting that childhood disposition do not strongly predict all the time adult personality. There can be certain changes also. So, this gives some reassurance to parents of challenging children and caution against assuming too much of continuity between childhood. So, it is a positive thing in sense we can mold child and shape their personality, particularly in the early childhood period or even in adolescence. So, this is in a sense certain positive aspects that research shows. Some research shows that even certain psychotherapy and drugs using those can change the personality also. For example, in 1980s, a comprehensive literature review confirmed that psychotherapy can lead to long term changes in one's behavior. Lot of people actually can change their lot of personality traits, especially people go for psychotherapies because certain problematic aspect of their behavior they want to change, which may become part of their personality. And research shows that lot of these psychotherapies which are aimed at changing people towards more adaptive behavior. If something is problematic, they are not able to adapt, and certain emotions are causing problems. So, psychotherapy aims to correct that in the right direction, and lot of research shows that there can be long term changes because in behavior because of psychotherapies. In this context, long term behavior change means it is synonymous to change in personality. Recently, psychotherapy has increasingly involved in the prescription of some medications such as Prozac. So, these are a lot of psychiatrists prescribe medicines for certain psychological disorders, and research shows that some of these drugs could change personality. For example, drugs like Prozac, which are given for treatment of depression, can also make changes in individuals more extroverted and less anxious. So, that means they can also make certain changes in the personality. People after these drugs, they are more likely to become more extroverted and less anxious. So, their impact can be quite stable. So, certain drugs could also stimulate certain personality changes. Moreover, a single dose of that hallucinogenic drugs like psilocybin administered in controlled medical setting has been shown to increase openness to experiences up to 1 year or more. Some other drugs could also impact certain changes in the personality like openness to experiences. However, in these approaches, only problem is despite this option, drugs have potential side effects. A lot of these drugs that are used for treatment, they can have many other negative side effects. So, they are not like you cannot just use them for changing personality, they will have other impacts. So, they are used only for treatment of certain disorders, and psychotherapy is obviously an important option, but the problem is it is not so easily accessible to for a lot of people, it may cost people and so on. Certain targeted interventions can also change personality, like interventions related to, let us say, openness to experience. Openness to experience tend to decrease in the old age, that is what we have found in the research. However, a study involving 30-week training program for men aged 60 to 94 demonstrated that this tendency can be changed using some very targeted interventions to change certain mental perspective. Even at the very old age, research shows that people can change their mindset in terms of certain traits like openness to experiences. So, this program, which included practice of inductive reasoning, activities like crossword and Sudoku puzzles, led to an increased openness among the participants who are in a very old age groups. So, this is one of the first study that shows personality trait can change even in the later in the life without drug interventions and so on. So, certain specific targeted intervention can be helpful in terms of changing personality. In the context of self-control, research also shows can also be changed and improved, which can be an aspect of personality. Some literature review surveyed aimed at children younger than 10 years old, based on the presumption that after this age it may not be so easy to change certain personality traits. So, certain targeted interventions that included exercise to help develop self control like meditation, relaxation and learning to think differently about temptations and frustrations. So, these are some of the targeted interventions were designed to increase the self control ability. The result consistently showed that children who received such training experiences fewer delinquency and problematic behavior during adolescence. So, their impact remain even when at the childhood certain programs are they experience this program, their impact even remained even in adulthood also, sorry, in the adolescence phase also, where that means, so a lot of these negative behaviors were controlled because they learned to have better self control. So, the recent evidence suggests that self control can be improved even after the age of 10. Techniques of mindfulness meditation, for example, can have shown to increase self control ability and so on. So, these are a lot of therapeutic and interventions programs are there, which can impact personality change, and mostly these are used for changing personality in the positive direction. If certain traits are problematic, causing distress and problems and adaptation in life, so this intervention can change those traits and from towards more positive traits in terms of their adaptability and so on. So, this shows that it is not the personality is not like it is impossible to change, things can change, at least the research shows in this direction. Now, let us see what are the causes of personality change, why personality change. So, we have discussed the causes of personality stability, why it remains stable. Now, let us see why it changes sometime. So, personality change, whether in absolute term or relative to peers, is indeed possible and can be influenced by various factors, why certain sometime it changes. While genes are typically associated with stability, one of the main reasons why personality remains stable is because of the genetic influence. Some says that this genetic influence can also may be programmed in the gene itself for certain changes in the personality. For example, they may also play a role in shaping patterns of personality change over time, analogous to how they influence, let us say, timing of pubertal changes. So, if you see some of the biological changes, it may differ from person to person in terms of for some people it can be 1 year ahead, for some people it may be 1 year delayed and so on, which can be programmed by the genetic programming and so on. So, similarly, certain personality change may be also programmed in the gene itself. Mostly the so where certain changes could be actually related to genetic influence also. However, research suggests that genetic influence on personality changes are very limited, implying that environmental factors are more dominant factors. So, genes are mostly related to stability. So, but some cases even gene can be causing certain changes, but the evidence for gene in terms of changes of personality is very less. That shows whenever changes happens, which research shows a lot of changes can happen, it is because of the environmental factor only, because mostly other factor lies in the environment. What kind of environment can change one personality? One is socialization and parenting. Early childhood experiences, particularly how parents and caregivers interact with the children, can significantly influence personality development. So, what kind of parenting experiences impact the personality of a child in a very strong way? For instance, the Kagan 1994 observed that toddlers with inhibited temperament, which we have discussed earlier, which are basically children who are very shy and less, they avoid new places and new people. Temperament who become less inhibited often. So, sometimes the children with inhibited temperament, sometimes this tendency changes and become less inhibited, often had parents who encourage them to engage with the novel situation rather than shielding themselves. So, this personality is also sometimes changed, which was in the child, during the children their temperament was very inhibited, means they were very shy and not interacting with people and avoiding new situations. Such children also changes in many cases and they become less inhibited. One of the main reason was the influence of the parents. So, parents, because they encourage them to change and engage with novel situation rather than shielding them all the time. So, conversely, children whose parents allowed them to avoid distressing situation tended to remain inhibited. If parents were not allowing them then such changes were not possible. So, parenting could instigate changes in personality, particularly during childhood period, what kind of parenting role they received. Sometimes personality can change because of certain life stress and major transitions in life. Stressful life event and major life transition can disrupt personality stability. When something very dramatic happens in one's life, some traumatic event, something very drastic changes in one's life happens, because the environment changes so drastically that because of this impact, person also changes. Research indicates that significant life changes are associated with reduced stability in personality traits. For example, experiencing life stress can lead to lasting changes in self-esteem and intimacy need. A lot of traumatic event when happens, people also completely changes. So, there can be complete transformation of personality when something very negative happens in one life. Let us say sometimes death of someone's very important in one's life can change the person who is associated with that person, because now this whole life structure changes for that person. Now, the person has to take extra responsibilities which was taken by the person who died. So, they had to deal with so many new things and they had to, so such person sometimes completely changes from as compared to who was earlier before, as a person who was the characteristics of the person who was before the death of that person. Such disruption in the environment can trigger personality change and individuals adapt to new circumstances, because they need to adapt to new circumstances which are very challenging, they had to change themselves. So, sometimes personalities can change because of dramatic changes in one's life. Sometimes personalities can also change because of changing social roles. An individual moves through different life stages and occupy new social roles. With the passage of time, our social roles also changes. So, child goes to adolescence, their role changes. When they go to adulthood, their role changes. When they marry and have child, their role changes. So, like that, in every stages of life, our social role changes. With the change of social roles, we have to change also accordingly. For example, when you become parent, sometimes in the career role also changes. People have to adapt to demands and expectation associated with these roles. This adaptation can result in lasting changes in personality. So, when suddenly your role changes, suddenly you are from single parent, you become a suddenly you have to take the role of a parent because of the birth of a child and so on. So, completely your role changes, your demand changes. So, personality can also change because of that. For example, in certain research by Helson and colleagues found that women who became mothers tended to show increase in responsibility and self control along with decrease in sociability compared to women who did not become. So, the moment women become mothers, sometimes their personalities and their roles and characteristics also changes because of the new responsibility, their ability of self control and adapting to lot of distress and workability and so many things could change because of the new roles. Similarly, longitudinal studies of male managers demonstrate that success in managerial roles influence changes in nurturance behaviors. The moment you become more successful as a manager or your role changes in the higher position, people also sometimes change their behaviors or certain changes may happen. So, social roles can also lead to certain changes in the personality. Now, these are some of the possible reasons why sometimes personalities can change. Now, even research shows that historically with the passage of time, overall in the population level, the personalities are also changing in terms of how the people were, let us say 30 years back, and how in the present generation the traits are changing with the passage of time. So, that is the historical changes. So, the concept that personality can change in response to shifting social circumstances is supported by recent research. Studies conducted by Jean Twenge and her colleagues using cross-temporal meta-analysis techniques have demonstrated significant shift in the average level of personality traits among young people over several decades. So, the young people who were let us say few decades back in 70s, 60s and the young people in today's world, there seems to be change in the personality of people in the population level, not the individual level. For example, they found there is a change in the self-esteem and extroversion. So, Twenge's study indicate that young people of today report higher average level of self-esteem and extroversion compared to individual in 1960s. So, 60s may whoever individual were there in terms of population level, the today's generation are more extrovert and they have higher self-esteem. Mostly these studies were conducted in the western context. So, at least in that context also there is a changes in personality historically. So, this suggests that cultural shift towards valuing individual self assurance and sociability, which could be responsible for such changes. They have also observed some gender differences. Over time, there has been decrease in gender differences in personality trait. Young women in particular have shown increase in assertiveness and other traits traditionally associated with masculinity. So, the gender differences are also decreasing with the passage of time, because the women are taking more roles which the males used to take in today's world. So, more traits associated with assertiveness and leadership role, and all these things are decreasing simply because in today's world scenarios or environments are changing. Women are able to take more roles which were traditionally given to the males for roles and so on. So, that is also decreasing in terms of traits. In terms of anxiety and neuroticism also, recent samples of young people exhibit higher level of anxiety and neuroticism compared to earlier generation. Now, this is one kind of, one can say more of a negative finding in the sense that today's generation is much more having higher anxiety level as compared to let us say 60s young generation, or they are showing more of a trait of neuroticism, emotional instability is increasing. So, this trend reflects societal changes that may contribute to increased stress and mental health challenges among young generation. So, that means in today's generation, young generations are facing much more stressful situations, much more challenges and more of mental health problems, which could that is what it is reflecting here. The locus of control also they found certain changes is happening. So, Twenge also found that recent cohorts or recent population are more likely to perceive their life as controlled by external forces than their own internal desires and abilities. So, that means as compared to the earlier generation, today's generation they find reasons more in the outside of themselves. So, they are more externally locus of control is increasing. So, they are more likely to perceive their lives as controlled by external forces rather than their internal desires and abilities. So, this shift suggests that changes in how individuals perceive and attribute control over their lives, possibly influenced by cultural shift towards external validation and societal pressure. So, people are becoming more of an externally oriented in terms of finding causes of their behavior. This is also another change they noticed. So, this finding underscored that personality trait can evolve over historical time frame in response to changing social and cultural conditions. So, with the changes of overall environmental factors in terms of broader social and cultural factors, people are also changing. Some personality change could be self initiated, it may not be only because of external factors or biological factors. So, it is possible that some personality change is partially self initiated. So, nothing is completely, because we can always say partially, because at least some involvement of the person himself or herself. These changes often involve profound shift in perspective and meaning which individual perceive, altering their personality. Sometimes people change completely because whenever something happens which may be triggered by some external things, but they themselves completely shift their mental perspective of life, meaning of life changes sometimes, and so they also change accordingly. So, these experiences are typically catalyzed by significant life events or periods of emotional distress, as we have already discussed. Sometimes some drastic changes in life can trigger, and it cannot happen automatically, you have to kind of also participate in it. So, even that is why we are kind of self initiated. So, person kind of looks actively why this has happened in life, what is the meaning of life. So, that all these things shifts their perspectives. So, that can also change personality. Now, at the end we will be discussing about why, although we have seen the evidences for both stability of personality and some possible changes which are possible in the personality. So, there are evidences for stability of personality, there are evidences for certain changes in personality within certain limits. Now, generally what we see that changing of personality is not so easy. Obviously, it is much more easy when during childhood it is more of malleable, one can change their personality much more, at least with less effort, even that is also not so easy. But with progress of age, the changing of personality is much more difficult and it is not so easy. People cannot overnight cannot change, it happens very rarely. So, what is the obstacle in changing personality? Why it is so difficult to change personality? So, some of the reasons I will be just talking about at the end. So, this is one reason is that satisfaction with current personality. If somebody is very satisfied with the way they are, then there is no need for change and there will not be any change. So, many people are generally content with their personalities as they are and may not perceive compelling reason for drastic change. They may not see any reason why they need to change. So, then there is no possibility. So, a lot of people actually are satisfied with the way they are, which is fine. While some may express a desire to enhance certain traits slightly, most are not seeking actively, most people are not actively seeking to change themselves. They may here and there see certain problems in themselves, they may try to change few things, but most people are not very actively or consciously trying to change themselves. So, that is why people generally do not change their personality. Another reason is difficulty in acting contrary to traits. Once a personality is set after certain experiences from childhood or certain stages of life, then it is very difficult to go against it, because it becomes a set pattern. So, there is an inherent inertia of changing. So, people do not feel comfortable, because it becomes a comfort zone whatever the way they are, and going beyond that is very difficult and they feel highly discomfort in terms of behaving contrary to that. So, that is why also people do not change. So, even when individuals recognize sometimes there has to be some changes should be done, it is not so easy because of the difficulty in behaving opposite to their personality. For example, introverts becoming more extroverted to enhance social interaction, the actual act of behaving contrary to imagined trait is very difficult. So, when let us say somebody is very introvert and want to increase their extrovertness, so behaving extrovert for an introvert person is very difficult, because it is not simply in their patterns. So, they find lot of inner resistance. So, that is also needs sustained effort, and which can lead to exhaustion, and people sometimes then give up. So, sometimes certain traits are very strong, not easy to change. Sometimes there is a blind spot and external attribution. Individuals often attribute negative experiences or failure to external factor rather than acknowledging how their own personality trait contribute to this outcome. Many times our own personality traits cause a lot of failures and problems in life, but people generally do not want to see that it is within themselves. They always want to find reasons outside themselves, especially for the negative experiences and outcomes in life. They will always find it is because of the external factors I failed, or I am not able to experience certain positive things in my life. So, when you see the reasons outside, you do not feel like changing yourself, because you do not see the reason within yourself. When you see it within yourself, you will like to change yourself. When you see it outside yourself, you will always see what is problem in the outside. So, because of this tendency of external attribution, people also do not change, because they tend to blame external circumstances more, which hinders their self awareness, that what is the problem within themselves, they do not focus on that. Another reason is desire for consistency and predictability. We want to be consistent in our behavior. We make certain images of ourselves and we want to maintain that image. And so, changing personality means your image could also change. So, people do not want to do that. So, people generally prefer consistency and predictability in their lives. Pursuing significant personality change often means stepping out of comfort zone, learning new skills, engaging in unfamiliar behavior, which can be uncomfortable and unsettling for a lot of people. So, generally people avoid that. Okay. Another reason is resistance in certain personality types. Individuals with certain personality traits are they do not change, because they are resistant to change. Such as narcissistic personality may face challenges in recognizing the need for change and resist effort. Certain personality traits are very problematic, like narcissistic people, who always they all want attention for themselves, and they have very problematic relationship with other people, because they always want to be the center of attraction. So, narcissistic trait has some of these characteristics. Such people, they do not see any problem with their behavior, and they create all the problems for other people. So, when such trait themselves becomes hinder self awareness, we cannot generally we do not expect such people will change, because they do not see any problem in their behavior. So, certain traits are like this, they are highly resistant to change. So, these are some of the reasons why personality change is difficult. Having said that, it is not impossible. Research shows that certain changes happens, but generally it becomes more difficult with the progress of age. It is much more easier in the earlier ages of or earlier stages of life. So, personality is by and large more stable, but there are certain changes possible in certain conditions. We have discussed all this aspect here. With this, I will stop here. We will be talking about some other aspect in the next lecture. Thank you.